Hi, my name is Steve Ursenyi, and welcome to One Final Twist.
All right, today on One Final Twist, we have an author who's actually kind of special to me because in Nashville, you were my first autograph. And I was standing in line to get signed in to the whole thing. And I came running at you
Yes, you
with
did.
this. And you said, "Are you Canadian?" And I was like, "No." So you were my first official author signature as a reviewer. So this is kind of special to me, and we're excited to talk to you about your writing process, the Alex Martel series, what's next, and I have so many questions. So
Well, I remember that actually. I remember you coming across the room with a book because you were my first autograph, my first signature as an author at that particular conference. So, and actually, maybe ever, like in terms of someone presenting my book
yeah.
to me to sign, I think you were the first ever. So,
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I totally jumped line. I was like, gotta go.
Hey, you
I just took
so you
off.
know Brad Thor has a restraining order against her. She can't get near Brad Thor. So,
yeah, it actually makes us equal because I think Brad Thor has one against me too. So,
He tried to steal my bourbon. I got upset. It just is what it is.
yeah, well, you got to protect your bourbon, Teresa. So,
Before we get started asking a lot of questions, tell us. So the newest one is Blood Oath. So tell us a little bit about the series and then Blood Oath, and then we'll just go.
yeah, Blood Oath or the series, the Alex Martel series or the Special Agent Alexandra Martel series is a high octane action, espionage thriller series, globetrotting thriller series featuring my heroine Alex Martel, who's a former military combat medic turned sniper turned intelligence officer, etc. And it's about following her antics as she goes around the world hunting down bad guys and taking care of business. In a nutshell.
And Blood Oath is it no? Did it come out November last year?
Came out in November. Yeah, and Blood Oath is the third in the series. And, all three books are just a little different. In that Perfect Shot, the first one, the debut, was kind of a more high action threat to the world from one single event. Book two took on more of a political feel, a geopolitical feel, where the world was threatened by, behind the scenes machinations of people involved in wanting to create trouble and stir up trouble globally. And with Blood Oath, I wanted to take it down to a more personal level. So it's more of, Alex is on vacation with her dad in Africa, in Tanzania. And her dad, who's a retired general, gets kidnapped while they're on safari. So it becomes her mission, becomes her obligation to fulfill a vow that she made with her dad long ago, a blood oath, to find him and bring him home.
What was the original nugget of inspiration for the series?
Oh, that's a good question. The series, I had there was none really. It was just me playing around many years ago. When I was starting to write, I'm a pantser. So I don't think of what a story might be. I literally just sit down and start typing. And once upon a time, I started typing about a female character, Interpol character in Amsterdam, of all places. And she was a detective with Interpol. I had this kind of hybrid organization, what Interpol was. And that character became who Alex subsequently became. So that wasn't the first Alex Martel book, but that gave me the idea of this female character who was going to be a badass character. So ultimately, when I started to write the first book, which actually wasn't even Perfect Shot, there was one book before Perfect Shot, which is the one I wrote. It was the Alex Martel story. She was at Interpol working out of The Hague. So same way that Perfect Shot starts, but it was a different story. So that was my first manuscript. There was no nugget other than as I'm typing away, learning about who this character is, I was getting more and more interested in pursuing that part of the story. Who is this person, Alex Martel? What does she do? What stories does she come across? What misadventures does she get into? And it was in following that sort of path that I finished the first book. It took me 4.5 years to do, but it became the way I got my agent. We then polished it up for submission. I went out on submission with it, but when I went on submission, it was the week that New York, the publishing industry, shut down because of the pandemic in 2020 or 2021, 2020. So my agent basically said, we're not submitting it anymore, pulling it back from submission. And I was already writing Perfect Shot. So by the time Perfect Shot came around, I already had the core of the characters. I already knew who Alex was, some of the background characters that she worked with. Caleb was brand new in Perfect Shot, so he was introduced for that book. But it was all about picturing this character in a scene and then writing from that scene outward. And that's how the story of Alex Martel and Perfect Shot came to be. And then I sort of started thinking a little bit in terms of where do I go next, but not with any big character or story arcs.
How does it feel to write a female the caliber that Alex is? How did you come up with Alex?
Yeah, so it's funny because it was never intentional. It was never my intent to write a female character. Like I said, I literally played with writing a long time, and I started lots of stories, and most of my stories started off with male characters, but all the stories and all the characters seem to be really sort of 1940s noir Humphrey Bogart type characters. You could picture him in a trench coat and a fedora, smoking a cigar or a cigarette. So it wasn't until I stumbled on writing the character of Alex that I started to feel, for whatever reason, the character developing more. And in terms of the inspiration for who she became, I was a paramedic for more than 30 years and a tactical medic with the police for a number of years as well. So a lot of the people I was partnered with, both as a paramedic and worked alongside as tactical, like SWAT officers, were women. So in those professions, I never asked or considered the limitations of anybody I was working with, male or female, because legitimately everybody was the same. And I honestly, without being patronizing, I work with some of the best female operators in the business in the policing world and in the paramedic world. So, that, if you want to call that inspiration, that was what kind of inspired or helped inform the story, because I never really gave Alex many limitations, maybe some physical limitations in terms of, she's not Jack Reacher 6'6", and she takes her lumps in a street fight, but I never really thought much beyond that in terms of limiting her. So, and my wife's pretty badass herself. So I married a woman 38 years ago who was a paramedic back in the 80s. And there were very few female paramedics in the 80s. So she was a groundbreaker back then. And she keeps me in line even today. So I had a bit of a home-based inspiration for that.
Well, I'm a retired EMT, and I can agree with what you do or what you say about the females. There are a lot of females that I just soon work beside a female as some males, because they do. There's just something about a female paramedic. Their mind is wired different than a man. It really is. It's more critical thinking, observation, that kind of stuff. And I get where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
Does your wife help you with Alex's dialogue and like her attitude and stuff? Because one of the things that I notice when a man writes a woman's perspective, I will pick up on it. If it's not good, I'm gonna put it down right away, and it will just throw me off. But you have got her attitude nailed, everything, the way she carries herself, the dialogue, all those things. So who kind of goes over that with you?
Oh, that's, it's funny because when I'm writing, Lynne doesn't see, my wife's name is Lynne. She doesn't see my work until usually much later in the story or at the very end. So I guess most of that honestly comes from my own experiences with working with people and knowing people. I'm not a 20-year-old, so I've had some life experience, and I've got to work with men and women and hang out with men and women equally. So I'm inspired in that way by everybody I've met. But Lynne has helped at the end. If I say something that's out of character, and I think, Teresa, this is what you're hinting at, there are times I'm sure I've written something badly. Maybe Alex was twirling her hair too much or picking up a mirror and adjust. Who knows? I'm sure I wrote something really cliche that a man would write about a woman, not knowing, not being a woman and knowing exactly what to write. So Lynne has, in the figuratively speaking, smacked me upside the head and said, Alex would never say that, or Alex would never do that. So when I'm writing it, I write the character and the stories on my own. But in the editing phase, and Lynne is really active in the editing phase, she really helps rein me in and make sure I don't step over the lines of what an actual woman would say or think.
So when you develop your antagonists, so how do you pick them? How do you pick the bad guys and what's going to happen next? Do you know, like, in advance? Because I know you said you had and she's not a prequel to the Alex Martel story, but do you already know going into it, or do they just happen?
Not a clue. They just happen. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll use Perfect Shot as example. The way Perfect Shot opened and the way I wrote it was literally Alex lying on the forest floor in a ghillie suit, so a sniper suit, looking down the scope of her rifle at an airfield. And that's all I knew about the story. And then I went from there, and that scene develops and progresses. And then, I know I've got to introduce some other aspect to the story and a bad guy. Well, Russians are always fun to make the bad guys, even before the war in Ukraine, because my background is Hungarian. So Hungary, of course, was behind the Iron Curtain, under the fists of the Soviet Union, all that stuff. I visited Hungary and spent summer there when I was 12, 13 years old. So I kind of got a sense of what it's like to live under Russian rule and what the attitudes are. And of course, that makes me a Cold War kid a little bit. I grew up in the Reagan days of seeing, the Russians as the main enemy. And I still personally think they are the main enemy in the world. So that makes it easy in a way to take sort of stereotypical characters and have the story revolve around sometimes Russian bad actors, sometimes other bad actors that are jumping up to the fore now, like, the Chinese Ministry of State Security or whatever the MSS is. I think that's the right acronym. But anyway, so I try to find bad guys they start out kind of cliche, but then I try to make them more human. I give them a more personal side. I try to think, well, even this guy thinks he's a good guy, and probably his kids think he's a good guy, or whatever the storyline might be. So bad guys are fun to write because it's easy to write a bad guy as a very one-dimensional or two-dimensional character. But the fun of writing a bad guy and the better bad guys are the ones that develop more something that the reader can root for or at least understand. So really they develop out of the story, sometimes kind of as a plot device. I need a bad guy here. Who's that going to be? And then if you take a lump of clay, you kind of build that clay into a model of whatever you want it to be. And that's kind of how my bad guys come to pass. My antagonists come to pass.
The scene that you're talking about hold on, Scott. The scene that you're talking about at the beginning, and so I won't say anything because it was so good, but I was like, oh, we're gonna get right into this. All right, Alex, let's see what happens. And then it all kind of plays out. Oh, you got me. It surprised me. I didn't know how it was going to play out, like with the binoculars and her dad and the whole thing. I thought, oh, what's happened here?
Well, I'm glad. And that's the goal, obviously, is to, I had some really good examples growing up when I was an avid reader as a young man, reading Tom Clancy and Robert Ludlum and Nelson DeMille, and characters who could really, or writers who could really build a character and develop stories. So those are, and even before that, I was into science fiction with Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, people who could really, and Frank Herbert with Dune, people who could really develop stories out of nothing and just take you along for a journey. So that's kind of what I try to emulate in my own writing, is that journey, to bring the reader along on a journey.
While you've been doing research for one of your projects, has there been anything that you found that just totally shocked you in research?
Yeah, it's funny. Two things happen in research. One is I get surprised and shocked, and I come across some information. There's a plot device in Blood Oath that talks about the technology of being able to detect stealth aircraft, and it was developed accidentally or discovered accidentally by the Chinese, I believe, who using essentially signals that were interrupted. So essentially transmissions that were interrupted, they could follow the pattern of those interrupted transmissions to identify something that was blocking that transmission, whatever it was. So in a backhand way, they were able to, and I'm sure I'm not explaining the technology well, but in a backhand way, they were able to show or demonstrate how they could detect undetectable aircraft, as an example. So I always come across surprises. Perfect Shot is a perfect example that I knew nothing about the catacombs of Paris until I wasn't even researching catacombs of Paris. I was reading about Paris, and somewhere I stumbled on the catacombs, and I went, the what? Catacombs? What are they? And then the more I got into that research, the more I figured, hey, that could be really cool in a story. So there's always neat things that I come across in my research that surprises me. The other thing that's fun with research is how many times research will just be point you to something that's sort of lucky or serendipitous. So I'll give you an example of that. There's a wine I mentioned in the story. In Perfect Shot, I mentioned a wine called La Vivandière, which I didn't know what it meant. I don't speak French well. I'm a little bit semi-bilingual, enough to order a beer in a restaurant, that type of thing. I had a bottle of wine called La Vivandière when we were in Paris, had a photograph of it. And then later on, when I was writing the story, I looked up, is there a meaning? Like, what is Vivandière? It turns out it's a woman who accompanied French troops into battle and prepared their meals for them, did their laundry for them, took care of the home front in the army camp, as it were. And that was the role of the Vivandière. So it became kind of just lucky in a way that here I'm writing a story about a combat medic turned sniper, a real warrior, and the wine that she happens to use is a wine about women who accompanied men into battle, 100 or 300 years ago. So it's always fun to stumble on little things like that. Sometimes they're shocking. Sometimes they just fit well into the story.
Do you put this information, like, especially the way that technology, politics, things that are happening in the world, do you put, like, I know I said like you have an open tab, but do you put these little things back and say, okay, that would be a good nugget. I'm going to use that in a story. I like that, for something in the future.
Boy, for the future, I'm trying to think if I've ever done that. Not really. I have, the only research I kind of have is on a project I'm working on now. So if I'm working on a book now, I'll have a lot of research for that. Generally speaking, I won't reuse that research later, or I haven't really at this point anyway. I mean, some things like the technical things, firearms, that type of things. But in terms of world events, I haven't really filed away something in world events that I want to use later on. It usually gets used at the time I'm writing the book.
So you mentioned some of your literary influences. Who would be your all-time favorite author that you will go back to?
It's funny because that varies almost year to year. There's different authors that come up, but I would say my go-to author has always been Daniel Silva. You can't see him above me, but he's one more shelf above. I come back to Daniel Silva all the time for the quality of his writing, for the way he blends espionage and intelligence and character-driven stories together. So I would say Daniel Silva probably. Nelson DeMille would be a second one. Nelson DeMille had such a powerful voice. He always wrote in first person when it came to the John Corey stories. I also read his other books, the John Sutter stories, I guess they were. And I just love they made me laugh. They were really good, strong mysteries and detective stories, but they always made me laugh because they showed me how important it was to build character and make the reader really, again, either like or relate to a character. And John Corey was one of my favorite characters of all time, just like Gabriel Allon. Daniel Silva's Gabriel Allon is another one. So I would say those two are the biggest influences.
Do you ever read outside of the thriller genre? You ever read like something? Okay, then tell us what is something that you read and enjoyed that you're like, I can't believe I read that and enjoyed it.
Okay, I'll give you two. One is less hard to believe. Last summer, I read Conclave. So the movie was based on the book Conclave by Robert Harris. I hope I'm getting the name right. I believe it's Robert Harris.
It is.
And Conclave was just a fantastic book, not a thriller in the action genre, Mark Greaney, Simon Gervais kind of way. But it was a really well-written book, and I loved it. And the book I read right after that, don't laugh, The Bridges of Madison County.
Oh, that's a good one, though.
Yeah. So, and it just because I read so much in genre, the action genre, the shoot 'em up, kill 'em, bad guy stuff, the Brad Thor, Jack Carr stuff, which of course I love. But I thought, I need to, as every writer should, I need to read more broadly, and I used to. So I wanted to consciously get back into reading a little more broadly outside my usual genre. So yeah, last summer was Conclave, followed by The Bridges of Madison County, and both were fantastic.
Yeah,
totally outside my genre, different style of writing, but again showed me different styles of writing and ways that I could maybe introduce some of that into my own writing.
I'm in the middle of Dungeon Crawler Carl that everybody's talking about. I can't even believe that I picked it up, and it is so daggone good. And if you would have asked me 2 years ago would I ever read like anything like this, or like I finished a Hobbit and a Halfling rom-com, and it's totally like PG, like clean.
yeah,
Would I read that? Yep, I love it. And
Yeah,
that's one of my 2026 resolutions, is to kind of try and find things that are out of my norm. And it does, it's like a palate cleanse, and it makes you see things differently when you come back to what you've been reading.
yep.
exactly. Yeah.
I read the same book she's talking about, and I really did enjoy it. I mean, it was total rom-com fantasy, but we focus on this podcast and what I review. Most everything is kind of hardcore thriller, suspense, and horror. So it's good that we change it up every once in a while, just to give you a fresh perspective and just kind of, like she said, a palate cleanser. Uh,
Yeah.
what is one of the most underrated novels, in your opinion, that's out there that people just don't talk about?
That is a really tough question. There's a lot of good. It's hard to name it. There's a lot of good book. I think part of the problem, Scott, is that there's 2 or 3 million books published every year right
Yeah.
now,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot of great books by authors who aren't hitting the bestseller lists, by authors who have chosen to be self-published, but they are getting hidden away because the sheer volume, the discoverability is so challenging. So I don't have an answer. I wish I had an answer of a book I've read recently by an author that wasn't getting enough attention, but I tend to read books that are getting attention.
Yeah. And I think, social media is a really good thing for the self-published authors. Of course, they work super hard and grind it out to get their books out there. We've had a couple on here. They're excellent books. They've just not gotten in front of the right set of eyes,
Yeah.
or they would be on the Times list and the USA Today list, and um, there's a lot out there, and I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and because I'm thinking, in terms of books I've read recently, I've read books by, Simon Gervais and Ryan Steck, The Second Son.
Yeah.
But these are books that are getting attention, the Brad Thor, etc. books, they're all getting attention. So I probably should focus more on books that aren't getting attention. But again, I'm guilty of that. I gravitate towards what the media and what the zeitgeist, the mood of the reading public tends to point me towards.
Yeah.
To see. And part of that's research, I suppose. It's like studying, what are people interested in? Not because I think a writer should ever chase the market. A writer can't and shouldn't chase the market. The way I write is I write what I want to read. That's what I write.
Yeah.
But it helps inform you of what other styles are out there and how people are received by the readers out there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's something I need to do a little more of for sure.
Kind of a follow-up to what you just said. You write what you read. is there a genre that you would like to write that you haven't yet? Because I know you focus mainly on suspense, thriller, action stuff. Is there a genre that you may want to stick your toe into and say, hey, let's give this a shot?
Yeah, and just to clarify a little, I write what I like to read, not so
Yeah,
much what I read, but what I
yeah,
want to read.
yeah.
Because in my mind, when I'm writing my Alex Martel books, I tend to write them cinematically in terms of, would I watch this if it were a movie or a limited series or something? And so that's how I try to, when I write, that's what I do. So to answer your question, is a bit of a spoiler alert here because I just finished writing a book. Well, I'm in the process of revising and editing it, but basically it's finished. And it's a slight departure. I know Teresa was probably going to ask this. Is this book I just finished, the fourth Alex Martel? It is not. It's a departure from the Alex Martel series into a slightly different world. So more upmarket fiction, more literary thriller, if you want to call it. I don't even know how I would label it completely, but it's more along the lines of a conclave. I won't say it's not a romance like The Bridges of Madison County, but it's written differently. So it's less outside action, less action oriented, more sort of character-driven interiority of the characters. Still the same plot, not plot devices, but still the same themes, really, which, my themes tend to be truth, loyalty, duty, service, those types of themes. In Alex Martel's series, that's explored through action and through bad things happening out in the world that Alex has to chase down. In this next book that hopefully we'll be going out on submission with soon, it's still the same themes. It's still about truth. It's still about honesty, but it's about what would the cost be? What's the cost that someone's willing to pay to protect the truth or to expose the truth? So it's more character driven, less action, but it sort of flows out from the Alex Martel series, if you want to call it that.
Sort of a domestic type thriller. Is that would that be?
No, it's no, because it's actually not set in North America. It's not set in the U.S. Per se. It's set over in Europe. I can't give too much away right now.
I understand. I understand.
But it's just a slightly different vein. I think people who read the Alex Martel characters and who like the stories, they like them, I think, not just because of the action. I think Teresa, you'll back me up on this. I think the action is pretty good. I have fun writing the action. But I think where the Alex Martel thrillers elevate themselves is who she is. She's just a fun character to follow. She's tough. She's principled. She's always going to do the right thing, no matter the cost. So I kind of carry that theme forward into this next book as well.
I was going to say you left out moral integrity with the Alex Martel series.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's a big one for me. I mean, I think that's important that, I hope I don't present it like as an ideal in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? Overly nostalgic or idealistic. But I think moral integrity should be at the backbone of how people like Alex operate. Like if you're in the intelligence community, hopefully that's one of the things that drives you is some moral integrity, that you want to do the right thing for the right reasons. I think that's really important. And that's why it's fun to write Alex and then throw challenges at her that might disrupt that ideal.
On each of the books in this series, and then going forward, if we get a fourth, you definitely everyone is different. So there's a different challenge for you as well. And then now that you're stepping out of the series, you have a different challenge. Is that something that you seek out for yourself? Is to, you're not falling into a mundane pattern. You're challenging yourself as a writer, you're challenging your character. So I'm guessing that's on purpose.
Yeah, it's on purpose. I have, so far the publisher hasn't asked for a fourth one. I don't know if they will. I'm hoping they will, but obviously it's out of my hands at this point. So in the meantime, knowing that I wasn't going to be, not that I haven't sort of planned one out or two or three, there is, by this stage, even though I'm a pantser, I kind of know where I'd like to go with the series. So I do have a fourth, fifth, and sixth book in mind. if the publisher comes back and asks for it. But in the meantime, without that, I still need to keep writing. So I probably started, as I've done before, half a dozen to 10 new projects that are in different stages of writing and development. But it's this other book that spoke to me that I wanted to pursue, partly because it was completely different in a way than the Alex Martel stories in terms of not so much action. Would I be able to tackle a story that was more character driven? So yeah, it's something I challenged myself with, but it also held the most interest for me. Like I said, I scoped out these other stories, and some of them were variations on other series or books that are out there, not intentionally, but just as I'm sort of fleshing out what the story might be, I'm seeing, or Lynne even saying at one point, that kind of sounds like this or that or something else. Whereas when I stumbled on this other story, it just hit me like a truck, and I couldn't help but sit down and write it. So it literally, from day one, from the moment I thought of the idea, it hit me like as I said, it just kind of blindsided me. And it's something that, as you say, was a challenge for me to sit down and do, and to see whether I could accomplish it or not. So it was fun to do for that reason.
Every author has a process. How, like with the new book that you're fixing to submit, how long did it take for you from the time you wrote chapter 1 until you sent it to an editor? How long did it take you to write that book?
It's still in my hands. It hasn't left my hands yet, but I wrote it faster than I've written any book before. So it was 4 months.
Oh, wow.
I started in August, finished it in December, and now I've been editing it for about a month and a half. So it was complete by just before Christmas. I finished it. So
Okay.
August, September, October, November, December, or November, December. So yeah, 4 or 5 months at the most, which is fast for me.
Yeah.
And now I figure I'll be editing it for another couple of weeks before it goes off to my agent for him to have feedback on, and either come back to me for more editing or go out on submission at that point. But yeah, but that's pretty, as I said, that's fast for me. That's remarkably fast for me. So I tend to be a fairly slow writer. I'm happy with a word count normally of 700-800 words a day. If I write 1,200-1,500 words a day, that's a really good day for me. This book, I was averaging 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. So
wow,
yeah, different beast.
Yeah.
Even when you were a medic, and I kind of looked up your history. It was pretty extensive, the things that you've done. Did you always know this is what you wanted to end up doing, was be a writer?
No, it was something I wanted to do kind of as a hobby. I never had I had no idea that this would become a career at all. It was always a dream of mine ever since I was very young to write a book and finish a book. It's just something that as a young fella I always wanted to do. And I started along, 20, 30 years ago, I started my first novel and just didn't get around to finishing it. So the answer is no. I had no idea this is going to be the career I would have later in life, but I'm happy it's been working out so far.
When did you know? When was that moment that you said, hot diggity dog, it really happened?
That was my question, Teresa.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I quit writing for a long time. I quit writing fiction. I was writing for a while. About 15 years ago, I was asked to write a column in a national paramedic magazine. And I did that for 3 years. And that helped give me the discipline to write to a deadline and write to a word count and keep my thoughts organized. And as I did, it kind of gave me the bug again to want to write more. And it wasn't until I met some TV writers. I was invited into a showrunner's room, a writer's room, to talk about what it is that a tactical paramedic does. And in the process of doing that, I led on to the group of writers that I like to write. And I told them why I stopped, that I kind of hit a roadblock and I couldn't figure out where to go with it. And all the writing advice back in the day was, well, if you're not outlining, you're not a writer. So I gave up because I'm not an outliner.
Yeah.
And the guys in the room, men and women, they just kind of all looked at me like I was an alien and said, Steve, if you want to write, just write. So in 2006 or 8 or 10 or whenever that was, that advice gave me the drive to pick it up again and start writing. And that's what I did. So then I just started cranking out bad draft after bad draft after, bad start of a book here and there. And actually, at the time, I was writing screenplays, teaching myself how to write screenplays and doing it all quite badly. But the point is that every bad thing you write gives you practice. So the next time you write, you're a little better. No great hockey player, baseball player, football player, artist of any kind, musician gets good the first time they pick up an instrument or a pen. It takes time to develop that muscle, or a football or a hockey stick. So, writing badly is the key, as long as you're getting something out there. And that's what I wrote badly for about 10 years before I stumbled on a story that I was thinking, hey, this might go somewhere. And that turned out to be the first Alex Martel story, which is right behind me there on the shelf. It was called By a Long Shot. So
is there any possibility of seeing Alex on the big screen?
I hope so. So I am represented in Hollywood. I have some agents out there who have been shopping it around. You guys probably know Hollywood's a bit of a hard nut to crack, and these days, budgets have been scaled back. I mean, they tend to. I don't want to be overly critical of Hollywood, but they like safe bets. Yeah. And newer authors, or not New York Times bestselling authors, we're not necessarily a safe bet. So even the story might be great and something they're tempted by, but no one wants to necessarily pull the trigger. But I know that it's the story. The books have been circulating out there. I do have great agents, and I'm hopeful that one day someone will make a leap of faith and turn it into a great movie or series.
Because like what you said, they do read very cinematically. I mean, Alex, and the second, I haven't read your third book yet, but the second book, I actually loved it. That's the one where they're on the yacht, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I read a bunch of books. I just want to make sure
that's all good.
I was on the right book. That I see that scene in my head. That it just the way it's written, Alex and her compadres, and that was just great, and I could really see that as a streaming series, and possibly even, a movie. I'd rather it be a streaming series so we could get a lot of the stuff that they have to leave out for, a 2-hour movie. They can go more in depth and but
I'm with you on that. 100%, Scott. I'm with you on that. No, and besides the commercial side, I mean, of course, everybody would like to have a Hollywood deal because, they tend to be fairly lucrative, but I love the stories as they are. And it would be a real kick to see those stories on the screen. And like you, I see them as more of a 6 to 8 episode series, just because it gives you a chance to really flesh out the characters. And
even Sanderson, he's one of the biggest fantasy writers now. He just announced that he finally has got his stuff. He's got options have been done, and they're all in the process. And it still could be 4 or 5 years before any of that makes it to the screen. So but it's a process. I understand completely.
Well, if you look at examples, I mean, the Terminal List, that's one separate, completely different example. Everything happened like lightning in a bottle for that. But if you look at Mark Greaney and the Gray Man series, Mark Greaney had been writing, I think the Gray Man was under option the better part of 10 years before it ever got a full green light. And then, the Russo brothers took that on and turned it into a Netflix movie. And we know, I mean, I've seen examples, maybe not the best one, but The Bodyguard, the Kevin Costner movie. Great movie. I think so anyway. I love that movie. And I read some time ago that was 30 years in the making. It had been optioned like 30 years earlier. As a matter of fact, the war they talked about in the book was the Vietnam War. Versus in the movie, it's updated to, I can't remember which, maybe the first Gulf War or second, I don't know, whatever it was. So sometimes it's a long process.
Yeah.
And it could be that there might be people out there even now who think they'd like to make it, but for whatever reason, they're not chasing me down. But I just want to let you know, everybody, I'm here ready to sign an option deal. So,
and hopefully you can get a consulting fee and they won't change too much about Alex in the story.
yeah. But ultimately, the way you look at it, the way I look at it, I'm with you. I hope they don't change too much, but ultimately, you're going to have to give something up, because when they put anything onto the screen, it's not so much a translation of a book to the screen. It's more of an interpretation.
Yeah.
So you hope they do a pretty faithful interpretation, but you never know.
That's right.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Who would you get to play Alex if you could pick?
That's changed a number of times. Again, I actually have a list on IMDb that I maintain for that. But one of the first people that I thought would make a great character, Alex character, was Emily Blunt. But not necessarily current Emily Blunt, but Emily Blunt as she was in the Tomorrow War with Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that movie or saw that movie.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal movie. And Emily Blunt was such an awesome character in that movie. So Emily Blunt was one. Zoe Saldana came to mind as well.
Yeah.
She screams a little bit too much for my liking in the Lioness series, but besides that, I think she's awesome. Again, I have a whole list of names, so we'll see what happens. As long as they make it, I don't care. How about you? Who do you see?
I don't know. I'm terrible at picking this because I only watch sports. You can't really ask me. If it's not on ESPN, I'm probably not watching it.
I just hope one day that someone will make it and everyone will just say, "Oh yeah, that's a perfect Alex." That'd be good.
What about Jessica Biel? Is she too old for that?
I don't know. I think she probably came up in my research once, and she might be on my list. I'm not going to be the one who says a woman's too old for a role. That's dangerous territory. But I do know what you mean. Same with Emily Blunt. Emily Blunt is not too old by any stretch, but she might be older than the character in the story. And I think that's what we mean. It's like who plays Caleb? Well, probably not going to be, Anthony Hopkins or Sean Connery for different reasons. But, you've got to have someone that matches the character in the story. So yeah, the interesting thing too is, there have been shows made, movies made, series made where I've never heard of the actor. And yet, you think the role would have gone to a really well-known character or actor. And here it's a no name at the time because we never heard of them before, but they turn out to be the absolute best casting choice for that role. So I'm open to just about anybody.
If our readers want, or our listeners, viewers, and readers want to get copies of your book that are signed, do you happen to have a website that they can get those from, or a local bookshop close to you?
So, yeah, in right now in the U.S., the Poison Pen out of Scottsdale, Arizona, they have. I'm not sure if they still have copies, but I left signed copies when I was down there. So right now in the U.S., that's the only place. Okay. In Canada, local bookstores. So Canadian's national retail chain is called Indigo Books. And every once in a while, I'll pop into an Indigo Books and do a signing. I did a signing this past weekend, but I don't have a mechanism to sign and get books to people. I got you. That's been a bit of a challenge.
I got you. Okay, no problem. And social media handles, if our people want to follow you and connect on social media, what are your handles?
My handles across the spectrum is my first name and last name. So at Steve Ursenyi. So it's at SteveUrsenyi.com or at Steve Ursenyi on Twitter or X or Facebook or Instagram or Substack or anywhere else people will find me.
Okay. Do you have a newsletter that you do?
I do. If people go to my website which is SteveUrsenyi.com, they can sign up for my newsletter, and that's a Substack newsletter that I put out. I try not to put out too many, just when there's something to say. So they can sign up from my website on my Substack newsletter.
Are you going to Thriller Fest or any?
I hope to.
Events? Are you?
I plan to go to Thriller Fest and BoucherCon this year, both. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody down there again. And are you going to both?
I think I'm gonna do Thriller Fest this year for sure. I mean, I'm kind of leaning on it. VoucherCon, knowing how many books I go into and come out of with, it will be a pain
Yeah.
in the butt. Plus, I
Yeah.
want to go for 10 days. If I do Calgary, I'm out of here for 10 days. I'm going to go
Yeah.
and do Banff and hike and stay gone and then do that. So it can be done, but I will be sad not bringing books home. I'm just
Yeah.
not gonna, I
I
don't
Yeah,
know
want
from
no.
to get them
from
back.
from BocherCon last year, I brought over 200 books home from
Wow.
BocherCon.
Yeah.
And that's not including the books that I took.
Yeah.
I took probably 50 or 60 with me, and I brought an addition. I mean, my wife's vehicle was packed, and and driving to Calgary is almost out of the question for us. We're in Tennessee,
Yeah.
so New Orleans is not that far. New York City's, it's a day and a half probably for us to do that, but driving through customs and the border, I'm just not for sure if we'll be able to swing that this year.
Yeah. Trust me, I know how the board, in terms of, because every time I go to a conference or to Poison Pen or wherever I go, I'm crossing the border.
Yeah,
And while I haven't had problems that people have been talking about exist at the border these days, it is a logistical challenge because it's hard
yeah,
to bring books back. Not
yeah,
because, you can declare them and all that and they're fine, but it's a physical load that you then
yeah.
have to either in carry on or whatever else. But something to keep in mind as far as VoucherCon goes is that your dollar goes a lot farther up
A
in
little bit
Canada
further it does.
than it does in New York. That's for sure. So,
Yeah.
well, I hope to see everybody somewhere, like whether it's Thriller Fest or VoucherCon.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do Thriller Fest also with my wife. But BoucherCon, I just definitely do BoucherCon next year because it's in, I think, Indianapolis or Philadelphia, one of those next year. So I don't know if I can cross the border. Well, we've got
Yeah.
passports and everything, but just bringing all those books back, either having to fly them or pay the shipping to get them back. And I hate not. I like physical media. I like the books,
Yeah, I'm the
and
same.
I don't care too much for ebooks, and I like to have, I got books everywhere. So
Yeah. Well, Teresa, like you said, if you get up there, go early, stay late, whatever, because it's an incredible area.
Yeah,
So from
if I
Calgary,
go, it's my oldest daughter, she's getting married in June, and she said she would go with me and then go so we go Sunday to Sunday or like Friday to Sunday. She would go with me the first part and just fly back on that Wednesday. So
yeah,
leave me to do the book thing.
yeah, yeah,
and everything from what I understand, because we talked to a couple of people from Calgary in New Orleans, and all of downtown where it's going to be is like connected by walkways and uh it you don't have to really get it because it gets chilly up there in October. So they said you don't really would have to deal with the snow and all that. So it's a
yeah.
good it's a possibility though.
October's a funny month. I mean, I haven't been to Calgary. The last time I was in Calgary was in 2010, and it was just to fly in. And then I was a tactical paramedic at the time, so I was actually going to a military base to do some training. It was minus 45 out.
Yeah.
And if you that's Celsius, but if you look at, I think Celsius and Fahrenheit line up at minus 40. So
Yeah.
what that would feel like. It was ridiculously cold, but that was mid-December. October, it can be hit or miss from what I understand. It can either be
Yeah.
a nice warm, sweatshirt kind of weather, or it can be bundle up in a parka.
Yeah.
We'll see. But Calgary is a great area. I mean,
Yeah.
the city of Calgary, plus of course, Banff is within a couple of hours drive, and Jasper's not that far away. So it's a fantastic area. I'm looking forward to going back.
Well, thank you for joining us. It was really fun talking to you.
I appreciate you guys having me on the show. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
sir.
It's been
We do
fun.
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. Yes,
Take
sir.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.